Of course, earlier on, our top headline story was Australia's Foreign Minister Penny Wong in Beijing trying to improve ties in a range of areas from trade to human rights to the global international order.
What if one of the United States' closest and most loyal allies suddenly decided to switch sides? For decades, Australia has been seen as an unshakable pillar of the Western order in the Pacific, a steadfast partner in the US-led alliance. But the whispers in the corridors of power in Canberra are growing louder, suggesting a seismic geopolitical shift may be imminent. Credible sources from around the world are revealing a once unthinkable possibility. Australia is seriously considering abandoning its historic alliance with Washington to join the BRICS bloc, and could even embrace China's yuan as a primary currency for trade. This is no longer a rumor, it's a real debate happening behind closed doors, fueled by trade rifts and a growing skepticism of American leadership. Is this the beginning of the end for the US dollar's dominance? Are we witnessing the dawn of a new world order, where old alliances crumble and new powers rise to take their place? Is this a wise strategic move for Australia or a dangerous gamble that will redefine the 21st century? Let us know what you think. Comment 1 if you agree that this is a necessary shift, or 0 if you believe traditional loyalties will prevail. Enjoy the video and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. And now, let's dive into the story. A political earthquake is quietly shaking the foundations of the world order, and its epicenter lies in an unlikely place. Australia, a country long regarded as one of the United States' most loyal and steadfast allies. For decades, the bond between Washington and Canberra has been built on shared values, deep military cooperation, and a common vision of a free world. But now, reports from reputable sources like the Financial Times and The Guardian are hinting at a once unthinkable possibility. Australia is seriously considering a historic pivot away from the embrace of its traditional ally and toward an ambitious new bloc on the rise BRICS. This is not just a shift in foreign policy. It's a sign that the tectonic plates of global geopolitics are shifting dramatically, and even the most established alliances are not immune to fracture. So what's driving a model ally like Australia to such a turning point? The answer lies in the America First doctrine of the Trump administration. As Washington escalated its trade war not only with China, but also with longtime friends, Australia found itself an unexpected casualty. Tariffs on aluminum, steel, and key agricultural exports delivered a hard blow to the Australian economy, which relies heavily on free trade. But the economic damage wasn't as devastating as the erosion of trust. To Canberra, these actions felt like a betrayal, a clear signal that past loyalty was no longer a guarantee of future protection. The first and most painful lesson was this: in an increasingly transactional world, even the most time-tested alliances can be jeopardized by economic interests and unilateralism. Trust, something that takes decades to build, can be destroyed by a few strokes of a pen. In the aftermath of this shock, Australia's domestic political scene in Canberra became sharply divided. Prime Minister Albanese's government stands at a historic crossroads, caught between two opposing schools of thought. On one side are the traditionalists, who argue that the alliance with the US is irreplaceable, a cornerstone of Australia's security and prosperity. To them, abandoning a relationship forged in shared history and wartime solidarity to chase an uncertain new coalition is simply too risky. On the other side are the pragmatists, those shaped by a harsh new reality. They argue that the world has changed, and clinging to an increasingly unpredictable superpower is no longer a sound strategy. For them, diversifying partnerships and deepening ties with emerging powers like China, India, and Russia is not just a strategic choice, it's a matter of survival. This internal rift deepened further when Donald Trump bluntly declared that America will no longer be a crutch for its allies. To Australians, this wasn't just policy, it was an insult. It validated the worst fears of the pragmatists, that the US no longer sees them as equal partners. And while America has been preoccupied with protectionist policies that alienate its allies, another power has seen a golden opportunity. Beijing has moved swiftly, not with threats or ultimatums, but with a well-calculated charm offensive. Chinese diplomats have ramped up their presence in Canberra, offering attractive deals that Washington seems unwilling to match. Instead of confrontation, China has adopted a softer approach. Preferential trade agreements to offset U.S.-imposed tariffs, long-term investment pledges in infrastructure, and an open invitation to join an expanded BRICS Plus framework. On the surface, these are cooperative, mutually beneficial offers. But beneath them lies a larger strategic objective: gradually pulling Australia out of the Western orbit and into a new economic order centered around Beijing. The second key lesson here is the growing power of soft influence and economic statecraft. In the race for global influence, tangible economic partnerships and investment projects can sometimes prove more persuasive than military strength. China has shown that it is not only the world's factory, but also a master architect of international relationships. If this scenario becomes reality, the global implications would be profound. For the United States, losing Australia would not just mean losing an ally, it would mean losing a strategic pillar in the Indo-Pacific. Analysts at the Rand Corporation have warned that such a development would shatter America's containment strategy against China, as Australia has long hosted key military bases and intelligence facilities. Worse still, it could trigger a domino effect, prompting other regional players like New Zealand or the Philippines to reconsider their own allegiances. Ironically, a doctrine designed to protect American interests, America First, may end up undermining America's global standing. For the BRICS bloc, gaining a member like Australia would be a symbolic triumph. It would transform BRICS from a coalition of emerging economies into a legitimate global power center capable of challenging the West. Australia would become a strategic gateway for the bloc in the Southern Hemisphere, offering rich and stable supplies of raw materials, while bolstering BRICS' global credibility. Even India, a country with a complicated relationship with China, is believed to support the move, as it would strengthen BRICS' southern flank and elevate New Delhi's own strategic influence. And the final and perhaps most important lesson: the fragility of the current world order. The US-led unipolar world is steadily giving way to a more complex multipolar one, where nations have more choices and loyalty is no longer a given. Australia's dilemma, torn between loyalty to the past and opportunity in the future, is a microcosm of a world undergoing deep transformation. Whatever Canberra chooses, that decision will help redraw the map of global power in the 21st century. What do you think about this story? If you agree with the analysis, leave a comment with the number 1. If you disagree or see things differently, type 0. Let's open up a thoughtful discussion. Your perspective helps us better understand how people are interpreting these global shifts. Don't forget to like this video, share it with others who care about geopolitics, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any of our upcoming deep dives into international affairs, global economics, and the forces shaping our future. And now, let's continue exploring the next chapter of this unfolding story. If Australia's story reflects an ally proactively seeking a way out, Taiwan's case reveals a far harsher reality. The fate of a strategic partner can be determined by the cold, calculated interests of global superpowers. In the US-China trade war, everything can be commodified, and alarmingly, even long-standing security commitments are not off-limits. The most shocking development came with reports that the Trump administration had decided to suspend a $400 million arms aid package to Taiwan. This was no ordinary bureaucratic delay, it was a move executed with precise political intent. The timing of the decision said it all. It came just before a high-stakes phone call between President Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping. In diplomatic language, the message couldn't be clearer. Taiwan's security was now on the negotiating table, used as a bargaining chip to secure trade concessions from Beijing. Even more telling was what came afterward in the official statements from both sides. Taiwan, arguably the most sensitive red line, was completely absent. This silence spoke louder than words. It strongly suggested that a deal had been struck, a concession had been made, and Taiwan was the price paid. Facing this difficult reality, Taiwan responded with a mix of concern and resolve. President Tsai Ing-wen delivered a strong statement, warning that peace and stability on the island depend on Taiwan's own deterrence capabilities. Her call to strengthen national defense was not just political rhetoric, it was an acknowledgement of a new reality. Taiwan can no longer fully rely on the protection of an ally whose policies may shift unpredictably. Meanwhile, the Taipei government issued a carefully calibrated diplomatic response. It refused to confirm the suspension of the aid package, but subtly reaffirmed that the U.S. has always supported Taiwan's defense needs. This was an effort to save face and avoid further straining relations with Washington. However, behind the official statements, a wave of unease swept through Taiwan. At a major defense expo in Taipei, the atmosphere was tense. Defense contractors and military officials, long accustomed to close cooperation with the U.S., were caught off guard and scrambling for information. The episode clearly shook the foundations of strategic trust. International analysts quickly dissected Washington's move from multiple angles, and the conclusions painted a troubling picture. William Yang from the Crisis Group described it as a tactical maneuver by Trump. He argued that the president was temporarily easing pressure on the Taiwan issue in order to secure a better trade deal with Beijing. However, Yang warned that even temporary lapses in support can create fatal vulnerabilities, openings that China is all too ready to exploit, turning short-term compromises into long-term erosion of U.S. commitment. Craig Singleton of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies focused on the imbalance of the trade-off. He pointed out that Beijing cleverly used symbolic, low-cost gestures such as pledging to limit fentanyl exports to extract far more valuable strategic concessions, like lower U.S. tariffs and a softer stance on Taiwan. In his view, the U.S. was trading core security commitments for minor economic gains, a losing bargain. Meanwhile, Amanda Xiao of the Eurasia Group offered a more forward-looking analysis. She suggested that while U.S. support for Taipei won't disappear entirely, its nature will fundamentally change. Instead of symbolic aid packages that signify alliance solidarity, support may shift toward strictly commercial arms deals, where Taiwan will need to pay full price. Alternatively, major arms sales could be delayed or politicized, depending on the outcome of summits or high-level diplomatic meetings. This would turn the alliance from one based on shared values and trust into a transactional relationship, more akin to that of a customer and vendor. Ultimately, this episode offers a sobering lesson about the true nature of foreign policy under the America First doctrine. It reveals that for the Trump administration, there are no permanent allies, only permanent interests. Even long-standing security guarantees can become bargaining chips in the high-stakes game of trade negotiations. For Taiwan and for other U.S. partners around the world, this is a cold wake-up call. Self-reliance and self-defense are more vital than ever, because the protection of a superpower can be here today and gone tomorrow, depending on shifting calculations of national interest. When connecting the dots from Australia to Taiwan, an ironic and deeply troubling paradox begins to take shape, one that sits at the heart of this evolving geopolitical narrative. The America First policy, originally designed to protect the U.S. economy and punish strategic rivals like China, is now ironically becoming one of the strongest catalysts advancing the very objectives it was meant to stop. Rather than strengthening America's global position, the push for tighter control and unconditional loyalty has instead weakened the alliance system the U.S. spent decades building, and in doing so, has pushed some of its closest partners toward the open arms of Beijing. Australia's story is the clearest example. When faced with U.S.-imposed tariffs from its own trusted ally, Canberra was forced to confront a bitter truth. Loyalty is no longer a guarantee of security or prosperity. The message sent by Washington, whether intentional or not, was clear. Alliances are now conditional and transactional. This left behind a strategic vacuum, one that China, with its attractive economic deals and well-executed diplomatic strategy, moved swiftly to fill. Likewise, Taiwan being turned into a bargaining chip revealed that even core security commitments can be sacrificed for short-term trade interests. When allied protection becomes uncertain, countries have little choice but to start looking for more reliable alternatives. This growing instability is not just felt in diplomatic circles, but also across the global economy. One clear example is the phenomenon of front-loading, where companies around the world rushed to import Chinese goods ahead of tariff deadlines. The result: shipping bottlenecks, overwhelmed ports, and sudden surges in freight demand. But this wasn't just a business decision. It was a symptom of a global trade system losing its predictability. It reflected a deep erosion of trust in international norms and commitments, pushing businesses to act out of fear and uncertainty rather than long-term strategy. So what happens if this trend continues unchecked? The world could be standing on the edge of a fundamental geopolitical restructuring, perhaps the most dramatic since the end of the Cold War. What we are witnessing is not only the rise of a new alliance, but the emergence of a parallel world order. The BRICS bloc, long seen as an informal economic club of emerging powers, is beginning to transform into a real geopolitical force, a viable alternative to the dominance of the West. If a developed core Western country like Australia were to join BRICS, it would mark a symbolic turning point, blurring traditional East-West lines and legitimizing BRICS as a truly global option. In the end, the greatest irony of the America First doctrine is that it may ultimately lead to America alone. In a multipolar, hyper-connected world, a nation's strength isn't measured solely by its economy or military, but by the quality and depth of the alliances it builds. By prioritizing short-term gains and undermining long-standing trust, Washington is slowly dismantling one of its most valuable strategic assets: its credibility as a reliable partner. And in the global race to define the 21st century, the winner may not be the one with the highest walls, but the one with the strongest bridges. If you found this content insightful and thought-provoking, don't forget to hit the like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue producing in-depth analysis on geopolitics, economics, and the future of the global order.